Okay, here's a little video, hopefully help some of you guys out. Timing belt and water pump replacement on a T2C water-cooled 1.4 Brazilian Bay. Okay, we'll go through this one. Convert to right-hand drive. Obviously been here before. And 2014 1.4 Fox engine. Well, let's get to it. Tools you're going to need for this job: 6mm Allen key for the timing belt tensioner, 6mm socket for the bottom pulley and the water pump bolts, 13mm for the alternator bolts, 13mm socket for the main bolt on the tensioner for the belt, 10mm socket for the bolts that hold the plastic belt cover on, 19mm socket for the bottom of the crankshaft, your ratchets, some clamps, make life easy, just to clamp the hoses to keep the coolant, stop it from draining all the way out the radiator, or alternatively you might want to flush the whole system at the time. We're not doing that. Torque wrench, some instant gasket, make life handy for the water pump seal, a little bit of low grade nut lock, marker pen for marking your timing marks, a little bit 1200 grade wet and dry for cleaning the surface where the water pump goes on. You're going to need some antifreeze depending on how much you're going to be doing, if you're going to be flushing the whole system or just going to be doing the engine. If you're just doing the engine, you'll need about 3 litres. Your kit, remember of course, if it's the round O-ring, it's the 2, if that focus on there. If it's the P-shaped O-ring, it's the 1. I'm not talking about all that until you take it to bits. Your belt, 6PK870, and most importantly, a cup of tea. Thank you very much. Undo the clips. Take the plastic cover off. Take the auxiliary drive belt off. Slacken this bolt. Slacken this bolt. Slacken this bolt. But here's the sneaky one. Underneath, there's a bolt goes in there. I've just taken it out. It will not move until you take that bolt out. Once it's out, there you go. And now you can unhook the belt. 6mm Allen key. Take out the 4 socket screws which are holding the pulley on. Take the pulley off. You'll note there's a dimple at the bottom in the crank pulley, and there's a hole so the pulley only goes back on one way. Take out the bolts, 2 of them, which hold the lower plastic cover in place. Now you're in. Set your timing marks, dimple in the plastic here, and the dimple in the top pulley, and mark the bottom. There's a dimple on the back of the crankcase and it aligns the middle of this slot. There's no marking on the front of the pulley, but you'll feel when it's at top dead center anyway. From there you can undo this to slacken and take the tensioner off. Don't worry about marking this. When it comes, there's an alignment mark with a pin on the side here, which you'll tighten that up later on, so you can just take this bolt out and don't have to worry about it. Okay, bolt out on the tensioner. You can see how the tensioner just hooks either side of this bolt. So when you come to put it back together again, you're going to align that and stick that on there and then stick the bolt in. So you can take this out now, throw the bolt away, new one comes with the new kit. Now, belt's gone slack. Just make sure that your timing marks, the pulley hasn't moved here and the pulley hasn't moved here, and from there you can carefully, there we go, the video camera's not the best, you can take the old belt off. Okay, next you're going to take out the 3 bolts that before pulling the water pump. We're going to try, I'm not going to drain the system properly, so I'm just using these cheap clamps just to nip off this as best I can. can't go any further because it's a steel pipe. Obviously the water in the radiator is high up and it's going to want to find its own level, which is going to be down here. So to salvage the water that's in the radiator tubes, you can just make out, where are they? Here we go. And you can see I just nipped against, I just pinched the two tubes that go forward to the radiator. So we'll save what's in the radiator forward, and we'll save what's little in there. We'll just lose what's in the block. Okay, little wiggle. There we go. I'm just going to drain it here. Obviously you can see I've got a bucket underneath. And we'll just let the engine block drain out there. Okay, that's it, stop draining. Because we've crimped the hoses, not that much came out, just what's in the case. Pump's absolutely fine, it's not leaking. However, it's only 55,000 miles on it, something like that. But it's 10 years old, hence why we're doing the belt. And as it comes as the kit, that bit for the bin as well. Okay, here's our first problem. Here's the kit that they supplied for this van. There's the number. Belt's perfect, tensioner's perfect. But, so you have to watch this. As you can see, the hole in the van is round, the water pump's round, but the one in the kit, I'll grab a hold of it here, it's a snail shape, obviously, totally different, and ain't going to go in there. So, okay, be careful when you're buying these. Check, you're going to have to check which engine's in your van, whether it's got a snail shape or a round one before you get the kit. Okay, here we are back again, fresh new day with our water pump issue. New water pump, notice round O-ring rather than the snail shape which was supplied before. So if you need to know, you'll see the last kit was a -1 with the snail shaped seal. You need a -2 if you've got the round style water pump. Hope that helps. Cleaned this surface here, a little bit of 1200 grade wet and dry just to take off any rust on the surface. And I like to cheat a little bit just to make sure we definitely don't have any leaks. A little bit of instant gasket RTV sealant around the O-ring seal just to make doubly sure. And then you can't go wrong with fitting it. The holes are offset, it only goes one way. You get the holes to line up. So that's you. And then of course, the bolt one on, and a stretch our cover across, which will hold everything in place. There we go, and we can get our bolts in. I'll show those next. 3 bolts in the top. This one's a little bit difficult to get to. Longer bolt in the bottom, remember. Water pump tightened up. Tightens to 25 Newton meters. For the tensioner securing bolt, a little bit of blue nut lock. Low grade, don't use stud lock, you'll never get it back out again. But it'll just make sure that this doesn't come slack on the tensioner. Okay, screw the tensioner bolt in. And remember, hold on, difficult again with one hand. There we go. Tighten this up. Remember that little fork goes over the top of that nut on the end there. Once it's tightened in, that'll jam on there. You can see this bit here. Okay. Don't tighten this bolt just yet. Hook your belt on, round the pulley, round the tensioner, round your water pump, and then from there, make sure your teeth are aligned, make sure that your marks are still in line here, and your marks are still in line at the top, and from there you can just hook the belt on and the teeth should align like that. Difficult again with one hand. There. Okay, you can push the belt on, you can see the teeth are in line, and then once that's in, we can go to tension this. Okay, now we can tension the belt. Put our Allen key in, and we're going to turn this clockwise until that pointer is in line with that pointer. It will go quick. There you go, you can see the pointer as I start to tension it, it moves round and move it. You'll see until the 2 points the two flat edges line up. At that point, nip the bolt. Don't over tighten it just yet, because you might have to adjust this. We're going to turn the engine a few times just to let everything seat in. Take the tension out of the belt that's all the way around about, and then we'll come back and readjust this. Okay, we've got our tensioner tightened up, nipped up, not overly that much. Our 2 pointers, the flat edges, the bottom sides are in line. This tensioner floats. If you can see, if I pull this belt, you can see this tensioner is free to move once it's nipped up. So, check our marks here. We've got my crude white mark at the bottom. What we're going to do is we're going to turn the engine over a couple of times. Right round, we'll take the camshaft, sprocket round, sorry, I'll crank this round, and what we're going to do is once we've wound this round a couple of times, manually make sure everything's okay, then we'll realign the marks at the top, and we'll check the proper short tooth aligns at the bottom, because of course we've got to cater for what stretch has been in the old belt. So at that point we'll ignore the white mark that I put on, and we'll go by the proper Volkswagen timing marks. I'll rotate this round and then we'll get back. Okay, spun everything round, and 3 or 4 turns. That takes up any tension in the belt, moves all the slack points and gets rid of it all through to the tensioner. If we have a look here, these are still in line, so we can tighten this bolt now. But our main key point is we want to check our timing marks now with the proper Volkswagen timing marks. So we've timed it here, we're back in line, and at the bottom we can now go and ignore my white mark, which was aligned with this dimple, because of course the old belt was stretched. Now we're setting the timing to the proper Volkswagen mark, and if you have a look, you'll notice these teeth, all these teeth are square at the back edge, but this tooth has a chamfer. Very difficult to see. Something to point it out. If you can just see that there, but that tooth, it's a square edge, this one's got a chamfer. And if you check the book, it says that this line here, this casing, not this dot, this line is the one which aligns with the chamfered tooth. So your bottom pulley, that's your marker against the book. So left hand ridge against the niche, so we know we're absolutely spot on in line. We're spot on in line at the top. We can now go and tighten this bolt. With this bolt tightened, 25 Newton meters, we can now go back and refit the plastic and put the 2 bolts back in on this one. Before you fit the pulley, just double check that the belt is in off the edge of the sprocket, so that there's a clearance between the back of the pulley and the belt. If this belt is hanging over the edge of this bottom sprocket, then something's wrong, something is out of alignment. So as long as the sprocket extrudes past the belt, you can fit this. Remember, the dimple here, it only goes one way, it goes on the dimple on the bottom here. So from that, you can spin that round until it lines up, locks in place, and then you can put the bolts in from there. I'll get that done and come back. A little tiny dot of low grade nut lock on the pulley bolts. Just make sure that these ones don't come slack. Wise move. With the pulley on, we can fit the belt. It suggests fitting a new belt. When you're here, it's not that much extra. Wait a minute, Ken. Look it over that end first. There we go. So, belt on, tensioned up. Part number for this, 6PK870. 6PK means there's 6 peaks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's 870 millimeters long. So order one of those when you get your belt kit at the same time. Well, next what we'll do is we'll get this alternator tensioned up. This tightened up, pulled across, and these bolts tightened here. And of course remember, the sneaky hidden bolt that's up round the back of the alternator that you get from underneath. Okay, tensioning alternator, a bolt in the back, inner one slack, and what we can do is we can tension. We're going to pull this out. I can't do it with one hand. We're going to pull this out, and then we'll pinch these two bolts here, this one, just to hold it at the right tension. And what we want when it's at the right tension is just be able to, on the longest run of the belt, turn it through 90 degrees. So as long as we can just twist it with reasonable force, then we've set the tension on this belt. 4 bottom bolts are all tight. Well, 5 actually. 2 on the one at the back, you can just see through there on the slotted arms, tensioning arms. The 2 at the front, and then of course remember, tighten the pinch bolt at the top. We've given it 2 revolutions just to make sure the belt's all seated, and then what we've got is just not that much force, but then there we go, there's our 90-degree twist. We're done there. Next thing we need to do is we'll put a mark on here which says the date and the mileage that we changed the belt. One last check just before we buckle everything up. There's our chamfered tooth in line with the left hand crease or casting in the block. So we can make sure, yeah, we've got the engine round several times, we're all quite happy, that's in line. Our dimple on the pulley and our mark on the plastic backing is in line. And of course we've marked on for future people who might be here, or even to remind ourselves in our old age that the job was done and when it was done. Next thing, last thing, cover on, and we'll get some coolant put in and get her running. Okay, our engine's up to temperature. Last little check, just make sure you don't have any coolant leaks from your water pump seal, which is nice and warm, all running happy. So, okay, 1.4 Fox engine in the Brazilian Bay. You can see coolant. Obviously with the engine running now, it's just dropped that little bit. So I'll top it up. It wants to be in line with this crease through the middle of the bottle. There's your coolant. I've used probably about 3 litres. Didn't do a full flush right the way through the radiator, not necessary in this job. So, one happy van. There we go. 2014 Brazilian Bay. Job a good one. Happy. Set for another 10 years motoring probably with the mileage. So hopefully you can do this yourself, and if not, you can always bring it to Barefoot Garage.